Hi, and welcome to the Delivery Note podcast, brought to you by Parcel and Postal Technology International. I'm Hazel King, and in this episode, I'm joined by Rob Carlyle to explore what Amazon's move into contract logistics means for the sector. Should incumbent operators like DHL and GXO be worried? Can customers rely on Amazon to provide consistency during peak periods? And will this move reshape the wider logistics market? Hi, and welcome to the Delivery Note podcast. I'm joined again by Rob Carlyle, Head of Logistics at the operations consultancy Argan & Co. It can't have been that bad. You've come back for a second time.
It was great. Thanks for having me back on.
You're welcome. So today we're going to be talking about whether open logistics networks can drive consolidation in a highly fragmented market. So at the beginning of May, Amazon launched a new service that opens its logistics network to businesses beyond marketplace sellers, expanding its role in third-party logistics. So we're going to explore today how this will impact incumbent operators and the challenges and opportunities in the wider logistics sector. So let's start, Rob, with why Amazon's made the move to open up its network and how it's going to impact Amazon's business.
I'd say that this is nothing new to Amazon. This is what Amazon's done in quite a few places, that they're essentially monetizing an asset and a network that they've spent quite a long time building already. They've done that through web services in the past. They've obviously done that through their previous fulfilment network. They're essentially monetizing capacity and capability that they've built for their own reasons. So it generates a nice kind of revenue line. But I guess the difference to this one is that they are, as you say, they are opening this up to customers beyond their own traditional Fulfilled by Amazon network. Mm-hmm. So this starts to open up pieces into sort of line haul transportation, into warehousing, into storage, into a true sort of external fulfillment network, and to wider third-party customers.
Okay, so wider than the parcel market, but obviously Amazon is incredibly well known for being the leader, I'd say, in the parcel market. Yep. So will the new service reshape parcel delivery market, or do you imagine it to be changing elsewhere?
I think it will, but I think the whole Amazon logistics, that the kind of Fulfilled by Amazon, sort of Amazon vans delivering non-Amazon products has already disrupted the parcel market. I see it will continue to disrupt that, but I see this going slightly further upstream, so more into the traditional sort of contract logistics type model where Amazon is potentially going to be providing pallet storage to customers and then pallet movements and, specific distribution into stores potentially or into other sort of, warehouse to warehouse transfers. So more than parcel, I'd say, is the view on this.
Okay, so who should be frightened then? Who's the most vulnerable to this expanded logistics offering?
So I think it's easy to say that the kind of traditional couriers, the likes of FedEx and DHL and people like that, those guys are already worried about Amazon, as they should be. It's a very competitive offer. But in DHL, for example, DHL Parcel has long been competing with Amazon already. This will actually move slightly upstream into the DHL supply chain part of it. So let's say a kind of different part of DHL will be worried about this, rather than necessarily just the parcel arm. So I think that the likes of DHL, GXO, Kuehne + Nagel, DSV, those guys who've got big, large-scale contract logistics operations, this is a move into their turf.
How can they protect themselves? What do you think they can do? Amazon, you hear that name Amazon, I would imagine the CEOs are shaking in their boots a little bit when they think they're going to be competing in that space when they're already competing in the difficult parcel market with Amazon. So what can those contractors do to protect their business?
It's one of the things about Amazon that kind of the word Amazon kind of like makes people get a bit twitchy regardless. So it's long been mooted that Amazon might move into pharmaceutical distribution, for example, right? They haven't done really at scale yet, but the pharmaceutical distributors have long been sort of slightly paranoid about Amazon sort of marching into that area. We've sort of seen people preparing for this, but for quite a few years, but contract logistics and parcels, it's about scale. So you need enormous networks, multiple assets, lots of delivery points, lots of vans, lots of people. Scale drives scale. So one of the reasons the Royal Mail is so successful is they have obviously a 500-year-old network from which they can sort of compete. So I think what you'll see some other consolidation in the market. You've seen big, large-scale acquisitions and mergers in the last few years. So DSV merged with DB Schenker. GXO has been highly acquisitive in the last few years. They've acquired Wincanton and Clipper and other people like that. So there is a constant need for scale, and companies always trying to increase the scale that they have. Because when you have got bigger scale, you can have more assets, more vans, you can provide a more compelling service. So I would expect to see some consolidation happen sort of in response to that. But one of the challenges, and we'll probably get onto this, is it's very difficult to outscale Amazon. So you need to have enough scale to compete with them, but then I think you need to compete not just on Amazon's core turf. You need to have a slightly differentiated offer against Amazon rather than trying to out Amazon Amazon, which is really hard to do.
I think it's probably impossible, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. Those large players, probably slightly worried. You've talked about those. Any opportunities for smaller ones that, perhaps Amazon would be seen to move away from providing that kind of parcel side of things more into this contract logistics? Any smaller parcel delivery companies that could perhaps use this to their advantage, or you don't think it will affect the smaller players?
One of the things that smaller players are going to have to do is differentiate themselves and compete on a more intimate, a more personalised service, looking after some of the smaller customers. So if you're a small business with a small website, your volume generally isn't big enough to warrant interest from these sort of really big contract logistics players. And if you do, you're typically going into their shared user network. There's a bit of a fear that you just become another number, just another customer to add into their big network. So for the smaller players, being able to offer that personalised, you almost compete on the fact that you're not big. You're not Amazon. We're smaller. We're more intimate. You will talk to people. You won't just talk to an AI chatbot. If you ring up, a kind of small business dealing with a small business will have a certain charm to it rather than necessarily just going into the kind of big machine. So I think definite opportunities, but they've got to be really clear on what value they're providing. Is it that service? Is it reliability? Is it something else? To sort of compete against, not where Amazon's weak, because Amazon isn't really weak anywhere, but competes on something which Amazon isn't directly competing on.
And I suppose also another issue could be around peak periods. Amazon then protecting its own business. It's moving into this bigger contract logistics offering. But when it comes to peak, is it going to protect itself and then its new customers fall to the wayside? That's
the big unknown. And that's one of the really interesting things we'll have to see play out in the next few years is, if you're a big operation whose operation tends to coincide with the peaks that Amazon's own retail business sees, the concern that you will have, to your point, is as my peak grows and coincides with Amazon's, are they going to protect their own instead of protecting all customers? I'm sure Amazon will have plenty of capacity, they'll have plenty of service capability to be able to deliver to everyone. And if you think about Amazon at Christmas time, it's a really rock solid operation around Christmas. It's very rare that you hear of sort of at scale issues with Amazon around these sort of big peaks. So Amazon will be aware of that. They're extremely smart. It's one of the things that they will be focused on for this to work, is that they have to avoid the perception that Amazon protects its own rather than is a sort of true independent player. I think that's one of the concerns that customers will have, and one of the reasons why they might be a little bit hesitant to jump in with Amazon, but they'll be heading that off. And the other one I'd imagine as well is that Amazon is obviously it's such an enormous company. It's got a huge web services arm, enormous data capabilities with Amazon. I think there'll be a little bit of nervousness from customers around, if I need to share my fulfillment volumes, my capacity, my orders, my planning, sort of base, all those things that you have to share with your logistics provider for them to be able to give you a really good service. If I'm sharing all of that with Amazon, what they're going to do with my data, might they use my own data to help improve their own operations? Yeah, there'll be a few concerns that sort of potential customers will have before they jump in with Amazon.
Yeah, but Amazon is such an intelligent, clever,
Absolutely.
Innovative company. I'm sure they'll have an answer for that.
100%.
And there's nothing to say that, I suppose as a caveat, we should say there's nothing to say that they will prioritise. But it's a good point to bring up and a good concern that people will have. And you talked earlier about there's been a lot of consolidation in this sector. Do you think consolidation is the right move, the right way to go? Does it make the service stronger for customers? Does it limit customers' options? How do you view it, and how can it be improved?
The UK sort of contract logistics market, it is actually really fragmented. It's got some huge names at the top, right? We just talked about some, GXO, Kuehne Nagel, DSV, these guys, right? Huge scale, huge operations, multi-billion, tens of billions of sort of global revenue. So even though there will be consolidation, it's still a really fragmented market. There are thousands and thousands of independent, smaller players out there, only operating, 5-10 trucks, but still have a kind of really robust business. There will be some consolidation that will continue to happen, but it's difficult to truly consolidate a really fragmented market. So that the kind of bigger players at the top will continue to be there, but there's still going to be plenty of room for the smaller, family-owned independent businesses. For the reasons we just talked about, there's having that more intimate, trusting, reliable relationship with a smaller business gives you quite a nice feel rather than, say, just being a bigger number to some of the bigger companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the time we feel like just a number, don't we? So personalised service is important, especially to those small players, those small e-commerce companies, new businesses starting up.
Yeah, but I just want to, if I pick back up on that point, that scale is everything in logistics. It allows you to invest more, to innovate more, to provide ultimately a a more price competitive service. If you want to be really competitive on price, as everyone ultimately has to be, you need a bigger operation to get the economies of scale that you need to have. So that's why you see more acquisitions. That means you've got more purchasing power, you can invest in more automation, you've got better technology, you've got a more global reach. So that's one of the reasons that everyone chases scale. Scale is everything. I think that's the flip side to that is why the smaller players still have a chance, is scale is so important, but with scale there is a risk that it becomes a slightly less personalised service. That's why I think, the smaller independent businesses still very much have a role to play here.
Yeah, it's great to hear as well. I'm sure they'll be delighted
Yeah.
to hear that they've still got an option when someone like Amazon jumps in. Is there any kind of regulatory issues around Amazon moving into this market? It feels like they own everything and they do everything, and it's slightly monopolised perhaps. But I know it's not, obviously being in the industry, but it feels like that. Do you think the regulators will be looking at competition, or do you think they'll sort of let it play out?
So the sort of competition regulator tends to get more involved in sort of direct mergers or acquisitions. This is Amazon sort of launching a new service, if you like, and trying to grow it organically. So I don't think that there can be any issues around sort of competition quite yet, unless Amazon were to launch a takeover bid for a huge player, something like that. So and then I'm sure the regulator would have quite a lot to say. If you think of the recent GXO Wincanton acquisition and merger, there were various conditions attached to that. I think Wincanton had to divest its grocery business in order to get through competition. So if Amazon were to make a big splash, for sure the regulator would have something to say about it. But I suspect it's more going to be around data, customer data, pricing, potential concerns around preferential treatment of its own customers, if it sort of were to come to that. So I see those as being the sort of potential issues down the road, but it's difficult to see those playing out quite yet because, again, Amazon is trying to scale this from almost a startup, if you can ever refer to Amazon as a startup these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think startups might have something to say about
Absolutely.
that. But it's an interesting move, isn't it? And it's good to keep everybody on their toes. And I suppose for customers as well, I imagine it will provide more choice and more incentivise the other players to provide a better service, do you think? To make sure they keep those customers, they're not going to move over to Amazon as it being a well-known brand?
Absolutely. From a consumer point of view, competition's great. Amazon is very disruptive in the markets in which it enters. It forces innovation. It forces better, higher quality service, sharper pricing. We saw the news when it sort of first came out. You saw some of the kind of share price dips, the likes of FedEx and things like that, and I think UPS as well. So I guess that's the market responding to potential growth limiter that Amazon is to those incumbent businesses, but it will put pressure on margins and on profits, as Amazon does in any industry that it enters. So really good for consumers. Ultimately, there is a risk, as with all big entrants into the market, that it might sort of squeeze the competition so much and squeeze other players out. But it's such a big fragmented market. I don't see any true customer downside in the immediate short term.
No, and I think with anything, competition can only be a good thing.
Absolutely.
It can only lead to more innovation, as you say, and more investment in that automation side of things, which is ultimately going to benefit business and bottom lines. Yeah, is there anything else that you think this will teach the market? How do you envisage Amazon moving into this space, evolving the market over and above what we've already discussed in terms of investments? How do you view this part of the sector in, say, 5 years' time with Amazon coming in? Do you think they will go for a big name? Do you think they would try and merge with someone like GXO or DHL? Or do you think they're big enough to stand alone?
Yeah, it's really hard to know. If I had a crystal ball,
I know,
what would I do?
it's a stupid thing to ask every
time.
No,
not at all. Because this is the thing with Amazon, is sort of trying to predict where they might go next is a really interesting game. So they've obviously launched their own website, and then they've tried to monetize website services basically through AWS off the back of that. Then they've obviously got their own massive fulfilment operation. They've then chosen to monetize their fulfilment capacity that they have. And now they're moving more into supply chain capacity. So if you look at kind of where Amazon is as a business, they will always seek opportunities to monetize what they have, that they have built for themselves, and how can they monetize that infrastructure and the services for elsewhere. I guess what this then starts to think on is kind of where might Amazon go next? So how far up the supply chain might they go? Do they go truly into sourcing, or do they go at scale into the freight forwarding business? Do they start going into true sea freight and true air freight, which they already are doing to an extent, right? They've got Amazon Air and so other platforms like that. So that's the thing of kind of, if they've gone from parcel and then upstream into contract logistics, if they were to go further upstream, what does that mean for the wider industry? That's the really interesting thing. But what they are generally is Amazon is typically cautious to a point and then extremely aggressive once it sees an opportunity. They might not be going there yet, but I suspect they'll have a keen eye on that.
Yeah, it's that yet, isn't it? It's always yet with Amazon.
Always.
Something new will be happening, I'm sure. Well, we'll have to have you back on again in a couple of years to see how it goes. But that's great. Thank you so much for joining us again today. And,
Pleasure, thank you.
I'm sure we'll have you back again. I hope so. Thanks for listening today. And don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. Join us next time on the Delivery Note podcast for more insightful discussions on the parcel, postal and logistics sector.